So other transaction agreements are all the rage. You've heard people talk about them, but what do they really mean? I'm here to tell you they are the best tool the government has to go make a business deal. In the traditional world, under a FAR-based acquisition, the government is trading money for a capability. And that might sound great to you. And that's how a lot of commercial work happens. We trade money for some type of good or service. But on the commercial side, in industry, you will see people put all sorts of deals together. They might trade other things of value other than money for a good or service. The government never had the ability to do that under the FAR-based rules. But with other transaction agreements, they do. So what does that mean? The government can create any kind of business deal they want under an OT, as long as the OT fits the right authorities that you're allowed to do what you're allowed to buy under those OTs. So you have OTs for prototype and OTs for research. For 10 USC 4021 and 10 USC 4022. Between these other transaction agreements, there's very specific things you're allowed to buy under them. I like to play in the other transaction agreement for prototype space. And I was one of the pioneers under the new rules of this when I did the Light Attack Experimentation Campaign. We did this in 2017, 16, 17 for phase 1, and then 2018 for phase 2. This acquisition authority allowed us to create a very unique business deal with industry. I had a new program. I was working with Dr. Metza and a handful of people inside AFRL at the time. They were looking to kick off a light attack program. There was no money to kick off this program, or not a ton of money, but we needed to actually validate that these aircraft were usable in a wartime or military setting. So the normal type of aircraft we would use to handle like a close air support mission or a CAS mission was the A-10, which is hardened and can take bullet shots and all sorts of stuff. But at the time, we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we had command and control of the skies. Our A-10 was way overtasked, so we were using F-15s to do our close air support mission. This was causing all sorts of problems because the F-15 can do air to ground, but it also is a jet. So we were just burning them up, going back and forth, trying to provide close air support. And our F-15 pilots were getting non-concurrent with their core mission of nuclear, guiding or taking care of our nuclear fleet. So when they would get home from their deployments, when they were out in Iraq and Afghanistan getting tons of flight hours, you'd think they'd already be concurrent with the right flight hours they need for their core mission. They weren't. So then they would get home from the deployment and they would immediately get sent back out away from their families to go get current on their nuclear escort mission that they had to do, or whatever their core mission was, because it normally wasn't CAS. So this caused them to be away from their families more, and their wives or spouses were getting upset with them, and they ended up leaving the military, and we would lose these pilots that we invested millions of dollars into training. So it was a big problem that just had so many layers to it. It was like, what if we used or bought a whole bunch of new aircraft, these light attack aircraft? They were turboprops, relatively inexpensive aircraft that can loiter and do all sorts of things for this very specific mission set. And let's kick it off. We already have command and control of the skies, so we don't need to have this super hardened aircraft that can take all these bullet shots and land. And it should be relatively easy to maintain if we find the right kind of aircraft that has a global supply chain. So we decided to go do the light attack program, but we didn't have any really money to kick it off. So I said, let's try an OT. And we built out this business deal for the companies. Our trade was that we would give them access to our engineers so they can go through and try to earn a military type certificate, which is effectively an airworthiness certificate that says the plane is legally allowed to fly. Those can only be issued by the military for planes that are weaponized. If they give us access to their planes, they train our pilots how to fly them, they maintain those planes for a period of months, and we don't give them any money to do this. The trade is the people that we have access to are very unique engineers and an authority that we have as the government, and they give us access to their asset, the airplane, and they keep that airplane flying for us. That was the trade. It worked out splendidly. we were able to kick off the program and then prove the military utility by using these other transaction agreements. So when they were shaping the rules, one of the things you're allowed to do for another transaction agreement for prototype is prototype for military utility. So we took an airplane that has been flying for a long time and we weaponized it. One of those airplanes was the AT-6. It was a version of the T-6 trainer. And we also had the A-29, both turboprop planes. There were a couple other planes involved in that experimentation campaign, but those were the two primaries. And ultimately, because they had weapons on them, they couldn't go get an airworthiness certification from the FAA. Well, turns out without airworthiness certification from a government body, those planes were not really able to be sold to foreign militaries that didn't have the ability to go and say that these planes are airworthy and safe. Most governments don't have the same capabilities from engineering prowess that our government has to be able to deem a plane airworthy. So they couldn't sell these planes, even though they were the most affordable weapons, affordable systems that some of these countries could buy, such as Africa or Southeast Asia. So the companies were highly interested in this, and we identified what the companies really wanted. They wanted to be able to sell their planes to foreign militaries and to be able to have their planes be deemed airworthy. And we wanted to prove that a program could work, and we wanted to get people flying the planes. So when we executed the program, we thought, how can we make this the best deal possible for everybody? If I know that they want to sell their planes to foreign militaries, what if we were to bring out like the chief of staff of the Air Force and maybe the SecDef of the Air Force, or Secretary of the Air Force, and have those people participate in a big demo day with the airplanes? Maybe we can invite out a bunch of the heads of foreign militaries as well, and it almost becomes like an endorsement. It's not an endorsement because you can't do that, but it kind of appears that on the surface, this VIP day, if you will. So we pulled that off as well. Long story short, the companies had access to our engineers. They were able to go get their military type certificates, which deemed them airworthy to fly, and they were able to sell these planes to foreign militaries. When we kicked off the program, we were doing a lot of battles in Iraq and Afghanistan. Ultimately, when Trump came in, he pushed the boundaries so far out, we no longer had command and control of the skies. So we were dealing with some of the SAMs over in Syria. So it didn't seem to be a program that made sense for us to pursue, but it was really good reps for the government to get under its belt and to prove that other transaction agreements can be used to go cut business deals that make a ton of sense for both industry and for the government. And then industry on the backside got their military type certificate and they could sell to all these foreign militaries, which creates a bunch of American jobs and all sorts of other benefits. So why do I tell you all this? Other transaction agreements give us the ability to identify the things that the government has that is valuable. People forget that the government controls policy. The government controls and has the ability to issue certifications and licensing. The government does these things as a governing body. It also can make the rules that say you have to have this specific license or this specific policy certification to be able to do work in these spaces. That's a very valuable tool in some cases. In other scenarios, the government might have access to very unique individuals, highly paid engineers, aeronautics engineers, whatever kind of engineers you may need access to. We might have access to unique airspace or ranges where you can do testing. All of these things don't cost a ton of money for the government to give or to make available. Companies often are always seeking the dollar first. What I'm here to tell you is the dollar is probably the lowest valued item that the government can offer. If you get creative enough and you think through what does the government really have that makes that could make your business go next level. So in the case for these foreign military sales activities, it was access to our unique engineering airworthiness talent where they were able to go get these military type certificates. In the case of your project, what could it be? You need to think critically on what the government has that could be valuable. Maybe it's data sets. Maybe you need data sets to train your AI algorithm. Maybe it's something else. But you have the ability to think critically and you start the process by saying, what if there was no money on the table? The government had no money to spend, but wants to work with me. And I want to work with them. What would the government have that would be super, super valuable to me? More valuable than money? And how would I deploy that in my business to go make a ton of money, more money than the government can ever give me in one shot? When you identify that thing, you find your champion inside, and you solve a problem for that person and say, look, it's not even going to cost you anything. We can go put together another transaction agreement. Now, there's 4 different ways you can do another transaction agreement. The first way is to go with a non-traditional company. Non-traditional company requires no cost share, and you can leverage them. The definition of a non-traditional company is actually a lot broader than most people think. If you've not done business with the government in the last year, you will likely fit the definition of a non-traditional defense contractor. Even if you had done business with the government, there's ways to kind of still fit into the other transaction agreement rule set. The next way to do it is if you are a small business, you will ultimately qualify to be able to do an OT. If you are a large business, you have the ability to go partner with a small business, where there's some type of arrangement where the small business is leading. The fourth way, or the third way, depending on how you're counting, is to be able to do a 1/3 cost share. So if I'm a large company and I want to do an OT with the government, I can actually commit to doing 1/3 of the cost of the effort and bring that to the table, and that will create my OT. Now, what does 1/3 of the cost mean? Well, if there's no money on a contract, 1/3 is pretty easy math, right? So then we value what the company and what the government is bringing to the table. So I can value the trade value that the government is, or that the company is providing, and what the government's providing. And what was really cool when I did this for the Light Attack Experimentation Campaign was that we got to value the government time that went into the project, not just what my engineers cost, but my time as the acquisition officer. See, in a traditional acquisition, all this government time that it takes to actually put something on contract, that's viewed as a zero value cost, right? There's real cost. All these government people get paid a salary. These are real costs that are associated with the program, but they don't show up on the contract anywhere as a dollar. So from a company perspective, when the company's reviewing the contract, they see, oh, the government spent X amount of millions of dollars on a project. What they don't see is all the infrastructure that the government committed, all the resources the government committed to also executing that project, to include the manpower. So with the OT, we were able to actually quantify that. How much was that time worth of the government side? What was the opportunity cost on the government side for us to commit those resources? When we did that, that sent a clear message to the board of these companies that yes, the government is serious about this. They're investing serious resources in this project, which allowed them to green light on their side the resources we were requesting in trade. We put those on the contract, and I did the 1/3 cost share model where we demonstrated that the companies were contributing at least 1/3 of the total cost of the project. In this case, it was much more than 1/3, but we were able to demonstrate that and go do the OT. The final way to do it is with a waiver. And you can go get waivers. You have to go up pretty high to get them. And there's enough ways to go do an OT without a waiver that I wouldn't even pursue that approach. But other transaction agreements are your friend. They are all the rage right now. It takes an agreements officer inside the government to execute. And these are definitely far and few between when compared to the number of contracting officers that exist in the government. Normally, a contracting officer and agreements officer are the same person. They can be the same person. It's just a different type of warrant that they're given by the government. So when I was in the government, I was actually the most warranted person in the Air Force for a period of time because I had my unlimited contracting officer's warrant, which means I could spend unlimited amount of dollars on behalf of the taxpayer and on behalf of the government on FAR-based activities. I had an unlimited grants and agreements warrant, which allowed me to spend unlimited dollars on assistance instrument activities. So you have a difference between procurement, which is FAR-based activities, and assistance instruments, which are grants and agreements. And then I was the only person at that time that had my OT warrant. So my other transaction agreement warrant allowed me to do procurements that were non-FAR-based. So de facto made me the most warranted person in the Air Force at that time, which is really cool. I didn't realize that until I left. But when I reflected on it, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I actually had a ton of warrant authority and could buy more stuff than anybody else at that time. Now there's a handful of contracting officers that have a similar structure. They have all 3 warrants and they can buy stuff the same way. But you have to link up with an agreements officer to do other transaction agreements. They are different than grants and agreements under assistance instruments, and they are different than FAR-based. So you have to make sure the contracting officer has the right warrant to go execute. And if they do have that warrant, then It's all about how you make a business deal, and be very upfront with them on the things that you would love to see the government provide. And it don't have to be money. Money is the lowest valued item that the government can offer. There's so many more valuable things. And once you identify that, it'll supercharge your business. So if you liked what I had to say today, please subscribe, smash the like button on the video. And if you would like access to my direct acquisition plan, please hit me up on Instagram. You can find me at Vince_Pecoraro. I'll be happy to send it to you. Thanks. Have a great day.